They'd stopped calling for help. Radio silence hung over Eagle Base as operators strained to hear anything more from Phoenix Unit. The last transmission had cut through the command center 10 minutes earlier, fragmenting into static. Phoenix leader to Eagle Base. 2 men down. Cannot move position. Enemy forces overwhelming. Over and out. The words still echoed in the cramped tactical room. No one moved. No one suggested another rescue attempt. They all knew what happened to aircraft that entered the canyon of no return. Colonel Richard Blackwood stood rigid at the command table, his weathered face illuminated by the glow of tactical displays. The canyon stretched across the screen like an ugly wound carved between Afghanistan and Pakistan. 3 American aircraft had vanished there in the past month alone. Each rescue attempt had only created more casualties. "We have to send someone," a young lieutenant finally said, breaking the suffocating silence. Blackwood's response was immediate. "Who exactly you want to lose another bird and more men?" His voice carried the weight of command decisions that had already cost lives. "That canyon has claimed an Apache, a Black Hawk, and a Reaper drone. What else would you suggest we sacrifice?" The tactical room fell silent again. The unspoken answer hung in the air, nothing. There was nothing they could send that would survive the canyon's deadly embrace. Until a voice from the doorway changed everything. "What about a warthog?" Every head turned. Chief Master Sergeant Jack Harmon stood in the entrance, arms crossed over his chest. At 67, Harmon was a living relic from another era of American air combat. His weathered face had seen Desert Storm and a dozen other conflicts that younger officers only read about in training manuals. 3 decades in the Air Force had earned him the right to speak when others wouldn't dare. Blackwood's expression hardened. "The A-10s are grounded for this sector, Jack. You know that." "Just asking if anyone's considered it," Harmon replied, his calm voice contrasting with the tension in the room. "That canyon is a technical pilot's nightmare, but the right A-10 driver might make it through." "And who would you suggest the one pilot who's been there before is grounded indefinitely?" Blackwood turned away, dismissing the conversation. "Phoenix knew the risks. Sometimes we have to accept losses." Harmon nodded slowly as if he'd expected nothing less. Without another word, he turned and walked out, boots echoing down the corridor of Sandstone Air Base. He had somewhere else to be. 20 minutes later, on the far side of the base, Major Sarah Reynolds stared at the desert sunrise from the empty flight line. Her fingers traced the edge of a coffee mug that had long since gone cold. 2 years since she'd flown. 2 years since she'd saved 8 Special Forces operators from that same canyon, nearly destroying her aircraft and her career in the process. The official report called her actions reckless endangerment of military assets. The men she'd saved called it something else entirely. At 38, Reynolds was entering the phase of her career where desk assignments became permanent. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and the lines around her eyes had deepened from squinting into too many desert skies. Her flight suit remained crisp even after months of inactivity, as if she refused to acknowledge her grounding was anything but temporary. She heard the footsteps approaching, but didn't turn around. Only one person on base would seek her out at this hour. "Morning, Jack." Harmon settled beside her on the bench, his own coffee steaming in the cool morning air. "You heard the comms." It wasn't a question. News traveled fast on the forward operating base, especially bad news. "Phoenix Unit," she confirmed. "Canyon of no return. Machine. Blackwood won't send a rescue." "He can't," Harmon corrected. "Nothing we have can navigate those terrain features and survive the anti-aircraft positions. Nothing except an A-10," Reynolds finished, finally turning to look at her old mentor. "And the only pilot who's ever flown through that canyon and lived is sitting right here drinking cold coffee." Harmon didn't immediately respond. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a worn leather notebook. "Your father's mission log. I've been holding on to it too long." Reynolds stared at the offering. Colonel James Reynolds had been a legend in the Air Force, one of the finest A-10 pilots during the Gulf War. His death during a classified mission in 1991 had shaped her entire life, pushed her toward the cockpit when everyone said she wouldn't make it. "Why now?" she asked, not reaching for the notebook. "Because Phoenix Unit is led by Captain Marcus Reeves." Harmon let the name hang between them. The information hit her like physical force. Marcus, her classmate from the academy. The one who'd stood up for her when instructors and cadets alike had tried to wash her out. the one who'd become a brother to her. Why wasn't I told? Her voice had gone dangerously quiet. Need to know basis. Their mission was classified from the start. Harmon pushed the notebook closer. But there's something else you need to know about your father, about that canyon, and about why I kept this from you. Reynolds finally took the notebook, feeling the worn leather beneath her fingertips. Her father's handwriting filled the pages, mission logs, and personal observations spanning years of service. But Harmon pointed to specific entries from March 1991, just days before her father's death. Your father wasn't killed in a training accident like they told you, Harmon said, his voice dropping lower. He died in that same canyon on a black operation. The official record was sanitized. Reynolds felt the world tilt beneath her. That's not possible. He died in Saudi Arabia. I saw the reports. False reports, Sarah. Your father discovered something in that canyon. Something the military wanted kept quiet. Harmon tapped the notebook. He documented it all here in code. Terrain features that created dead zones for radar. Unusual magnetic properties in the rock formations that disrupted targeting systems. And something else. Evidence of weapons testing that wasn't ours. Reynolds flipped through the pages, seeing the familiar handwriting with new eyes. Her father's neat script detailed canyon entry points, wind patterns, and blind spots in radar coverage. But between operational notes were cryptic references to Project Sunrise and coordinates that didn't appear on any standard map. Why are you showing me this now? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Because that canyon just swallowed another team, and nobody else on this base can fly through it and bring them home. Harmon met her eyes. But more than that, because whatever your father discovered is still there, and people are still dying because of it. Reynolds closed the notebook, her decision already made. Where's my bird? Ghost Rider is in Hangar 6, officially undergoing maintenance. A ghost of a smile crossed Harmon's face. The maintenance crew owed me a few favors. They've had her ready for the past hour. Ghost Rider, the A-10 Thunderbolt II, with hull number 117, the same aircraft her father had flown, the one she'd inherited when she joined the 355th Fighter Squadron. The aircraft had been her constant companion through 2 tours in Iraq, and the one she'd nearly destroyed saving those 8 men from the canyon 2 years ago. Reynolds stood, tucking the notebook into her flight suit. If I do this, Blackwood will court-martial us both. Probably, Harmon agreed, standing beside her. But those boys in that canyon don't have time for us to follow the chain of command. Sometimes the right order doesn't come from above. It comes from here. He tapped his chest over his heart. 20 minutes later, Sarah Reynolds walked across the tarmac toward Hangar 6. Her movements were calm and deliberate, and as if she were simply performing a routine inspection. The morning sun cast long shadows as ground crews went about their duties, few paying attention to the grounded pilot. The massive hangar doors stood partially open, just enough for a person to slip through without attracting notice. Inside, bathed in half-light, waited Ghost Rider. The A-10 silhouette was unmistakable, with its twin engines mounted high on the rear fuselage and the massive GAU-8A Avenger rotary cannon dominating the nose. The aircraft wasn't sleek or beautiful by conventional standards, but to Reynolds it was perfect. A single crew chief waited beside the aircraft. Technical Sergeant Mike Calloway had served with her father and had been her dedicated chief since she'd first climbed into an A-10 cockpit. He didn't smile as she approached, but his eyes held a fierce approval. She's fueled, armed, and ready, Calloway said quietly. GAU is loaded with 100 rounds. You've got 2 Mavericks under the wings and a full complement of countermeasures. Best I could do on short notice. Reynolds ran her hand along the aircraft's fuselage, feeling the cold metal beneath her fingers. Any issues I should know about? Number 2 engine runs a little hot at altitude. Keep an eye on it. Calloway hesitated, then added, I also added some modifications to the electronic warfare suite. Might help with whatever knocked down our other birds in that canyon. Reynolds nodded, grateful for the man's foresight. If this goes sideways... It was all my idea, Calloway interrupted. I'll tell them you had nothing to do with it. But that's assuming you don't bring Ghost Rider back in one piece, which isn't an assumption I'm willing to make. A brief smile crossed Reynolds' face as she accepted the flight helmet Calloway offered. In the background, Jack Harmon appeared with a tablet displaying weather conditions and the latest intelligence. Phoenix's last known position was here, Harmon said, pointing to a narrow section of the canyon where it curved sharply eastward. They were moving north toward the extraction point when they encountered heavy resistance. That was 2 hours ago. Reynolds studied the map mentally, overlaying it with the notes from her father's journal. There's a blind approach if I come in from the south at below 500 feet. Radar won't pick me up until I'm already in the canyon, and by then it'll be too late for them to organize a proper defense. Harmon agreed. But Sarah, once you're in that canyon, comms will be spotty at best. You'll be on your own. I've been on my own before. She checked her watch. What's Blackwood's current position? Command center, he's got the morning briefing for the next hour. That should give me enough time. Reynolds pulled on her flight helmet and climbed the ladder to the cockpit. The familiar seat embraced her like an old friend molded to her body through hundreds of missions. Her hands moved automatically over the controls muscle memory, taking over as she began the pre-flight checklist. Harmon stepped back as the canopy lowered. Through the clear barrier, he gave her a single nod, conveying everything that didn't need to be said aloud. Reynolds returned the gesture, then focused entirely on the aircraft coming to life around her. The A-10's twin General Electric turbofan engines awakened with a distinctive whine that grew to a roar. Instrument panels illuminated the cockpit with a soft glow as systems came online one by one. Reynolds felt the vibration through the stick and throttle, sensing the aircraft's eagerness to fly after months of inactivity. Ghost Rider systems check complete, she murmured to herself, confirming the final items on her checklist. Let's go get our boys. With practiced precision, she eased the throttle forward. Ghost Rider rolled out of the hangar into the morning sunlight, moving with deliberate purpose across the tarmac. Reynolds didn't request clearance from the tower. By the time they realized what was happening, she'd be airborne. The A-10 accelerated down the runway, gathering speed until Reynolds pulled back on the stick. Ghost Rider responded immediately, lifting into the clear desert sky with the grace that belied its bulky appearance. As the wheels retracted into the fuselage, Reynolds banked hard to the south, keeping low to the desert floor where ground radar would have trouble tracking her. Inside the command center, alarms began to sound. A flight controller's voice cut through the chaos. Sir, we have an unauthorized takeoff. It's an A-10 call sign Ghost Rider. Colonel Blackwood's face darkened as he instantly understood what was happening. Reynolds, he growled, who authorized the maintenance completion on that aircraft? No one answered, but all eyes turned to the empty space where Jack Harmon had been standing just moments before. Get me that aircraft on comms now, Blackwood ordered, and scramble security to find Harmon. I want him in my office immediately. Reynolds heard the tower's increasingly urgent calls through her headset but maintained radio silence. At 300 feet above the desert floor, Ghost Rider skimmed over rock formations and dry riverbeds, following a route only she and her father had ever flown. The massive aircraft handled like an extension of her body, responding to the slightest adjustments as she navigated by terrain features rather than instruments. 20 minutes into the flight, the mouth of the canyon appeared on the horizon. Even from a distance, the canyon of no return looked ominous, a jagged slash through the earth, with sheer rock walls rising hundreds of feet on either side. The locals called it Margdara, the Valley of Death, and avoided it completely. American forces had learned to respect that wisdom the hard way. Reynolds checked her father's notebook one last time, confirming the entry point that would keep her below enemy radar. Then she tucked it securely away and focused entirely on the approaching canyon. The A-10's engines growled as she pushed them harder, gaining just enough altitude to clear the initial ridge before dropping into the shadows of the canyon wall. The transition was immediate and disorienting. Bright desert sunlight gave way to cool shadow as rock walls closed in on either side. The canyon was barely 200 feet across at its widest point, narrowing to just 900 feet in some sections. For most aircraft, it would be a death trap. For the highly maneuverable A-10, it was merely an extreme challenge. Reynolds felt her heartbeat steady as she entered the canyon proper. This was where she belonged, not in some office pushing papers, but here where skill and instinct meant the difference between life and death. The aircraft responded to her touch like a living creature hugging the terrain as she kept it below radar detection height. The first signs of trouble came 3 minutes into the canyon. Warning indicators flashed on her console as the A-10's electronic systems detected scanning signals bouncing off the canyon walls. Someone knew she was coming. Reynolds immediately activated the electronic countermeasures Callaway had installed, hoping they would buy her enough time to reach Phoenix Unit's position. A new sound cut through her concentration, the urgent beeping of a missile lock warning. Reynolds didn't hesitate. She banked hard right, nearly scraping the canyon wall as a surface-to-air missile streaked through the space she'd occupied seconds before. The projectile detonated against the opposite wall, sending shards of rock cascading down into the canyon below. "So much for the element of surprise," she muttered, dropping even lower until Ghost Rider was barely 100 feet above the canyon floor. At this height, most targeting systems would struggle to lock onto her aircraft, especially with the electronic interference from the canyon's unusual magnetic properties. The canyon bent sharply to the left, forcing Reynolds to pull into a tight turn that strained against Ghost Rider's design limitations. The A-10 shuddered, but held the line engine, screaming in protest. As she rounded the bend, Reynolds caught her first glimpse of enemy positions dug into the high canyon walls. Small arms fire peppered the air around her, most of it ineffective against the A-10's heavily armored fuselage. A more serious threat appeared ahead, a heavy machine gun emplacement perched on a rock outcropping. Reynolds didn't give them time to bring their weapon to bear. Her thumb pressed the firing stud on the control stick, and Ghost Rider's signature weapon responded. The GAU-8A Avenger cannon roared to life, a sound like nothing else in modern warfare. 70 rounds per second erupted from the massive gun, the recoil momentarily slowing the aircraft's forward momentum. The 30mm depleted uranium shells tore through the machine gun position, obliterating it completely. Rock and debris rained down as Reynolds pushed through the cloud of dust her attack had created. "That's for the Apache you shot down," she said grimly, already scanning for the next threat. It came from her left flank, another missile launch that her warning systems barely detected in time. Reynolds threw Ghost Rider into a desperate maneuver, using the canyon's narrowing walls to her advantage. She inverted the aircraft, momentarily flying upside down with less than 50 feet clearance on either side before rolling back to level flight. The missile couldn't match her turn rate and slammed into the canyon wall, sending another shockwave through the confined space. Reynolds checked her navigation system, confirming she was approaching Phoenix Unit's last known position. She keyed her radio, hoping the team's communications were still operational. "Phoenix Leader, this is Ghost Rider. Do you copy?" Static filled her headset, broken by fragments of a response. "Ghost Rider. Position. Under heavy fire." It was enough. They were still alive, still fighting. Reynolds pushed Ghost Rider harder, ignoring the warning lights that indicated the number 2 engine was overheating. She had maybe 10 minutes at this performance level before something critical failed. The canyon widened slightly as she approached the coordinates. Reynolds could see flashes of gunfire below, centered around what appeared to be the ruins of an ancient stone structure built into the canyon wall. Phoenix Unit had taken shelter there, using the crumbling walls for cover as they held off attackers from multiple directions. Reynolds didn't hesitate. She brought Ghost Rider in low over the enemy positions, cannon blazing. The massive gun cut through rock and flesh alike, clearing a perimeter around the besieged Special Forces team. Men scattered as the A-10 passed overhead, some firing uselessly at the armored beast above them, others seeking cover that no longer existed. Banking harder, Reynolds came around for another pass, this time targeting a cluster of vehicles hidden in a side ravine. A pair of Maverick missiles detached from beneath Ghost Rider's wings, streaking toward their targets with unerring precision. The explosion echoed through the canyon, a fireball rising into the confined airspace. Through breaks in the smoke, Reynolds could see movement below. Phoenix Unit was taking advantage of the chaos, reorganizing their defense. She caught a glimpse of a figure she recognized even from this height, Captain Marcus Reeves, directing his men with the calm precision she remembered from their academy days. Her radio crackled again, this time with a clear transmission. "Ghost Rider, Phoenix Leader. Your timing is impeccable. We've got 3 wounded, including 1 critical. Need immediate dust-off." "Working on it," Reynolds responded, banking Ghost Rider away from small arms fire. "Extraction is inbound, but we need to clear this canyon first. What's your ammunition status?" "Critical," came the terse reply. "Down to sidearms and a half-dozen grenades. We lost most of our gear when we had to bug out from the primary position." Reynolds processed this information as she lined up another strafing run on enemy forces regrouping at the northern canyon entrance. "Can you move your wounded?" "Affirmative, but slowly. We've got maybe a kilometer of open ground to cover before reaching the extraction point." "Then let's buy you some time." Reynolds pushed Ghost Rider into a steep climb, gaining enough altitude to survey the entire battlefield. From this height, she could see what Phoenix Unit couldn't. They were surrounded. At least 30 fighters had taken positions along both sides of the canyon, with more arriving from the north. More troubling was what she spotted half hidden beneath camouflage netting, a mobile surface-to-air missile battery being set up at the canyon's northern exit. If that system came online, no extraction helicopter would survive an approach. Reynolds made her decision instantly. She pushed Ghost Rider into a steep dive, aiming directly for the missile battery. Warning indicators screamed as the G-forces mounted, but she held the aircraft steady, lining up the perfect shot. The cannon roared once more, a sustained burst that walked directly into the missile battery. Equipment and operators disappeared in a cloud of dust and debris. Phoenix Leader North exit is temporarily clear. Move your people now while I keep their heads down. Without waiting for acknowledgement, Reynolds banked Ghost Rider into a tight turn, bringing her back over the main enemy force. For the next 10 minutes, she became Phoenix Unit's guardian angel, strafing enemy positions whenever they attempted to advance, forcing fighters to keep their heads down as the Special Forces team made their slow progress toward the extraction point. Ghost Rider shuddered as rounds found their mark against the fuselage. The A-10 could absorb punishment that would destroy any other aircraft, but it wasn't invulnerable. Warning lights flashed across Reynolds' console, indicating damage to the left stabilizer and hydraulic pressure dropping in the secondary systems. The number 2 engine temperature continued to climb, now well into the red zone. Ghost Rider, this is Blackwood. The colonel's voice suddenly cut through her radio. Return to base immediately, that's a direct order. Reynolds ignored him, focusing on a new threat emerging from the southern canyon entrance. A convoy of 3 technical vehicles, each mounted with heavy machine guns, was racing toward Phoenix Unit's position. Ghost Rider, acknowledge transmission, Blackwood demanded. Little busy right now, Colonel Reynolds finally responded, lining up her shot. The cannon roared again, ammunition counter dropping rapidly as she destroyed all 3 vehicles with a single devastating pass. Major Reynolds, you are in direct violation of multiple standing orders. Return to base now or face immediate court-martial upon landing. Before Reynolds could respond, a new voice broke into the communication channel. Colonel, this is General Mitchell. I'm countermanding your order. Major Reynolds is operating under my direct authority as of 0700 hours. The radio fell silent. General Frank Mitchell was the theater commander, his authority superseding Blackwood's by several levels. His unexpected intervention changed everything. Thank you, sir, Reynolds said, genuinely surprised by the development. Don't thank me yet, Major, Mitchell replied. You still need to get those men out and bring yourself home in one piece. Extraction birds are inbound, ETA 15 minutes. Can you hold the northern exit that long? Reynolds checked her fuel and ammunition status. The cannon had less than 300 rounds remaining, and fuel was down to 40% with an engine running hot. It would be close. Affirmative, sir. I can hold it. She brought Ghost Rider around for another pass, this time focusing on enemy fighters attempting to flank Phoenix Unit from the high canyon walls. The cannon spoke again, shorter bursts now to conserve ammunition, each one precisely targeted to maximum effect. Below, Reynolds could see Phoenix Unit had made significant progress. They'd covered over half the distance to the extraction point, moving in a disciplined formation with wounded at the center. Captain Reeves was at point, directing the team's movement while returning fire whenever necessary. The radio crackled again, this time with Jack Harmon's voice. Sarah, we've got a situation at base. Someone's been transmitting encrypted data bursts coinciding with your attack runs. We think there's a mole feeding your position to the enemy. Reynolds processed this disturbing information while executing another strafing run. Can you identify the source? Working on it. But there's something else you should know. We intercepted communications suggesting they have one more surprise waiting at the extraction point. Some kind of new anti-aircraft system they're calling Crimson Skjonin. The name sent a chill through Reynolds. It matched a cryptic reference in her father's notebook, something he'd described as unlike any weapon system I've encountered. And whatever it was, it had been in development for over 17 years and had likely been responsible for downing the other aircraft sent into the canyon. Any idea what we're dealing with? She asked, banking Ghost Rider away from increasingly accurate ground fire. Negative, but it's not showing up on any of our thermal or radar scans, which means it's either extremely well hidden or employing some kind of stealth technology. Reynolds made a quick decision. Tell the extraction birds to hold at a safe distance. I'll clear the LZ first. She pushed Ghost Rider toward the northern canyon exit, where Phoenix Unit would soon emerge into relatively open terrain. The extraction zone lay in a small valley surrounded by high ridges, perfect for concealing anti-aircraft positions. If Crimson Sky was waiting there, she needed to find and neutralize it before the vulnerable helicopters arrived. As she cleared the canyon, Reynolds immediately began a systematic scan of the surrounding ridgelines. Nothing appeared on radar or thermal imaging, confirming Harmon's assessment. Whatever threat awaited them was invisible to conventional detection methods. Phoenix unit emerged from the canyon 2 minutes later, immediately taking defensive positions around their wounded. Reynolds continued to circle overhead, cannon ready but silent as she searched for any sign of the hidden threat. Ghost Rider Phoenix leader, we're at the extraction point. Any sign of hostiles? Negative, but stay alert. Intelligence suggests they have one more card to play. The distant thrum of helicopter rotors reached her ears as the extraction birds approached from the east. Two Black Hawk helicopters flying low and fast, standard protocol for high-risk extractions. Reynolds felt her anxiety spike as they drew closer with still no sign of the promised threat. Then she saw it not with her instruments but with her eyes. A momentary glint of sunlight reflecting off metal hidden among rocks on the eastern ridgeline. It was aimed not at her, but at the approaching helicopters. "Extraction flight! Break off now!" Reynolds shouted into her radio, already pushing Ghost Rider into a steep dive toward the ridgeline. The helicopters began evasive maneuvers, but too late. A missile launched from the hidden position, leaving no heat signature or radar trace. It streaked toward the lead Black Hawk with impossible speed and precision. Reynolds made the only choice she could. She threw Ghost Rider directly into the missile's path. The projectile's guidance system immediately recalculated, identifying the A-10 as a more valuable target. It adjusted course, now heading straight for Reynolds. With less than 3 seconds to impact, she executed the maneuver her father had documented in his final mission log, the one he'd labeled the Ghost Dance. Ghost Rider rolled inverted, then pulled into a dive that no missile could match, heading straight for the canyon wall. At the last possible moment, Reynolds pulled back on the stick with all her strength, sending the A-10 skimming along the rock face with inches to spare. The missile couldn't adjust quickly enough. It slammed into the canyon wall, detonating with enough force to shake the entire aircraft. Shrapnel peppered Ghost Rider's fuselage, puncturing the left wing and causing the already troubled #2 engine to flame out completely. Alarms blared throughout the cockpit as systems began to fail. Reynolds fought to maintain control, compensating for the loss of power on one side. Ghost Rider shuddered but remained airborne, a testament to the aircraft's legendary durability. Through the smoke and chaos, Reynolds caught sight of a figure standing on the ridgeline where the missile had launched. A tall man in nondescript clothing, observing the scene with professional detachment. Even at this distance, his posture suggested military training. He made no attempt to flee or fire again, simply watched, as if evaluating her performance. Reynolds banked toward him, intending to get a better look, but Ghost Rider protested violently. The aircraft was failing, multiple systems damaged beyond in-flight repair. She had minutes, perhaps seconds, before control would be lost completely. Below, the Black Hawk helicopters had landed and were rapidly loading Phoenix unit. Captain Reeves stood by the door of the lead helicopter, providing cover fire as his men boarded. He paused just long enough to look up at the damaged A-10 circling overhead, raising his hand in a gesture that was both salute and farewell. Reynolds returned the gesture, though she knew he couldn't see it. "Get them home safe," she murmured, already calculating her own chances of survival. Ghost Rider was losing altitude steadily, the remaining engine straining to compensate for its failed counterpart. "Ghost Rider, this is Phoenix leader. Birds are loaded and lifting off. Thanks to you, we're all going home." Reeves' voice carried genuine emotion. "Whatever happens next, we won't forget what you did here today." "Just doing my job, Phoenix," Reynolds replied, fighting to keep Ghost Rider level as the hydraulic systems began to fail. "See you back at base." The helicopters lifted off quickly, gaining altitude and speed as they headed for the safety of Sandstone Air Base. Reynolds watched them go, satisfaction temporarily overriding her concern for her own predicament. Mission accomplished. Now she just had to get herself home. Ghost Rider continued to descend despite her best efforts. The canyon that had been her battleground now seemed like her most likely grave. With the left wing damaged and one engine dead, she lacked the power to climb over the surrounding mountains. Her only option was to follow the canyon back the way she'd come and pray she could maintain enough control to reach the desert beyond. "Ghost Rider Sandstone Base, we're tracking your position," Jack Harmon's voice came through the static. "Your left hydraulic system is gone, and we're showing critical damage to your flight control surfaces." Tell me something I don't know, Jack, Reynolds grunted, wrestling with the stick as Ghost Rider lurched to the left. All right then, Colonel Blackwood has been detained by military police. They found transmitting equipment in his office and evidence he's been feeding information to a private military contractor for months. And General Mitchell wants to see you when you land, assuming you can get that bird back in one piece. Despite everything, Reynolds felt a smile tug at her lips. Now that is useful information. Ghost Rider shuddered again as the remaining engine coughed briefly, losing power before stabilizing. Reynolds fought down a surge of panic. She was still 10 minutes from clearing the canyon, and every system on the aircraft was degrading by the second. She reached for her father's notebook, flipping to a page she'd noticed earlier, but hadn't had time to study. It contained detailed notes on emergency procedures specific to this canyon, including a hand-drawn map of a wider section where a damaged aircraft might have enough room to maneuver. According to the map, that section was 3 minutes ahead, just beyond a sharp bend in the canyon. If she could reach it, she might have a chance to stabilize Ghost Rider enough for the final push to open desert. Jack, I need a favor, she said into her radio voice, steady despite the aircraft bucking beneath her. There should be a widening in this canyon about 5 clicks ahead. Can you confirm? After a moment, Harmon responded. Confirmed. Satellite shows a section approximately 2,000 feet wide, extending for about half a mile. It's the remains of an old river basin. That's my target, Reynolds said, more to herself than to Harmon. If I can make it there, I might be able to stabilize this bird. For the next 3 minutes, Reynolds focused entirely on keeping Ghost Rider airborne. The aircraft protested, every command, systems failing one by one as damage and stress took their toll. The stick grew increasingly unresponsive as hydraulic pressure continued to drop. By the time the canyon bend appeared ahead, Reynolds was flying more by instinct than by instruments. She banked Ghost Rider into the turn, feeling rather than seeing the canyon walls closing in on either side. The aircraft groaned under the strained metal fatigue, creating new alarms across her console. For a heart-stopping moment, the remaining engine sputtered, power fluctuating wildly before steadying again. Then, like a gift from above, the canyon opened up before her. The wider section stretched ahead, bathed in sunlight that seemed impossibly bright after the shadowed confines of the narrower passages. Reynolds guided Ghost Rider into the center of the space, finally having room to attempt emergency procedures. With methodical precision, she began shutting down non-essential systems to preserve power. The weapon systems went offline first, followed by secondary radar and non-critical avionics. Every ounce of remaining power was directed to the flight controls in the struggling engine. Ghost Rider's descent slowed, then stabilized. Reynolds allowed herself a moment of hope. She might actually make it out of this canyon alive. The radio crackled again, but this time it wasn't Harmon's voice that came through. Impressive flying, Major Reynolds. The voice was unfamiliar with a faint accent she couldn't quite place. Your father would be proud. Reynolds felt ice form in her veins. Who is this? How did you access this channel? Someone who has been watching your career with great interest. The voice remained calm, almost conversational. Your performance today exceeded expectations just as your father's wanted all those years ago. What do you know about my father? Reynolds demanded, hands tightening on the controls. I know he discovered something in this canyon that powerful people wanted kept secret. Something that cost him his life when he refused to look the other way. A pause. The same something that nearly cost you yours today. Before Reynolds could respond, the radio channel was overridden by Sandstone Base. Ghost Rider, we're detecting an unauthorized transmission on your frequency. Switch to emergency channel Delta immediately. Reynolds complied, but the damage was done. Whoever had spoken to her was gone, leaving only questions in their wake. Questions about her father, about the strange weapon system she'd encountered, and about who had been testing her all along. Ghost Rider cleared the canyon 10 minutes later, emerging into the open desert with a trail of smoke marking its passage. The remaining engine was operating at minimal efficiency, and Reynolds had abandoned any hope of a conventional landing. Her only option was a controlled crash on the hard-packed desert floor. She spotted a relatively flat stretch of terrain 5 miles ahead and aimed Ghost Rider toward it. With calm precision, born from years of training, she began emergency landing procedures, lowering what remained of the landing gear and preparing for impact. Sandstone Ghost Rider, attempting emergency landing at coordinates 379er621, requesting crash response team. Copy Ghost Rider, crash team is already en route. Good luck, Major. Reynolds took a deep breath as the ground rushed up to meet her. Ghost Rider hit hard, the impact jarring through her body despite the restraints holding her in place. The landing gear collapsed immediately, metal screaming as the A-10's fuselage scraped along the desert floor. Dust and debris flew past the canopy as the aircraft skidded forward, gradually losing momentum. After what seemed like eternity, Ghost Rider finally came to rest, settling at an awkward angle as the left wing dipped toward the ground. Reynolds sat motionless for a moment, taking stock of her condition. Bruised but intact, which was more than could be said for her aircraft. With practiced movements, she shut down the remaining systems and released the canopy. Desert air, hot and dry, rushed in to replace the climate-controlled atmosphere of the cockpit. Reynolds removed her helmet and climbed out onto the A-10's fuselage, surveying the damage. Ghost Rider was a mess. The left wing had nearly sheared off during the landing, and the fuselage was riddled with bullet holes and shrapnel damage. The left stabilizer was gone completely, and both engines showed signs of catastrophic failure. It would take months to repair if repair was even possible. Yet despite everything, Reynolds felt a surge of pride. This aircraft had done exactly what it was designed to do: take punishment that would destroy any other plane, complete its mission, and bring its pilot home alive. In the distance, she could see dust clouds rising from approaching vehicles. The crash team was minutes away. Beyond them, two black SUVs approached from a different direction, their origin unclear. Reynolds had a feeling she knew who they belonged to, and what came next would be neither a debriefing nor a court-martial, but something else entirely. She thought of her father's notebook safely tucked against her chest, of the mysterious voice on the radio, of the figure who had watched her from the ridgeline with such calculated interest, and a Phoenix unit safely extracted because she'd chosen to disobey orders and fly into the canyon of no return. As the vehicles drew closer, Major Sarah Reynolds stood tall atop the broken aircraft that had carried her through hell and back. Whatever came next, she would face it the same way she faced everything, head-on and without fear. The canyon had claimed her father, but it had failed to claim her. And in that victory, she had taken the first step toward uncovering a truth that had remained buried for far too long. The desert sun beat down mercilessly as Sarah Reynolds stood atop the broken remains of Ghost Rider. Sweat trickled down her neck while she surveyed the approaching vehicles, their dust trails stretching across the horizon like fingers reaching for her. The crash team from Sandstone Base approached from the west, while the two black SUVs came from the south, their origins unknown but their purpose clear. She climbed down from the aircraft boots, hitting the hard-packed earth with a finality that matched her mood. Ghost Rider had given everything to complete this mission. Now Reynolds would face whatever came next. The black SUVs arrived first. They stopped 30 yards from the downed A-10 doors, opening in perfect synchronization. Four men emerged dressed in dark suits despite the desert heat. They moved with the unmistakable precision of military personnel in civilian clothing. The lead figure approached alone, sunglasses hiding his eyes, but not the stern set of his jaw. "Major Sarah Reynolds," he said, voice clipped and professional. "I'm Agent Daniel Carter, Department of Defense Intelligence. You need to come with us immediately." Reynolds stood her ground. "My aircraft just crashed. Standard protocol requires immediate medical evaluation. Medical evaluation will be provided at our facility." Carter gestured toward the SUV. "This takes priority, Major, by direct order of General Mitchell." The mention of Mitchell changed everything. If the theater commander was involved, this wasn't just about her unauthorized flight. What about Chief Master Sergeant Harmon? "He's already been transported to the facility. Now please, Major, time is critical." Reynolds nodded once decision made. She cast a final glance at Ghost Rider, silently promising to return, then followed Carter to the waiting vehicle. The other agents formed a protective perimeter, scanning the horizon with the hypervigilance of men who expected trouble. Inside the SUV, the air conditioning was a shock against her skin. Carter sat opposite, removing his sunglasses to reveal eyes that missed nothing. "Your flight suit has a tear at the shoulder. Are you injured?" "Nothing serious." Reynolds touched the fabric, noticing the bloodstain for the first time. Adrenaline had masked the pain of what appeared to be a shrapnel wound. "Where exactly are we going?" "Facility 7. Carter handed her a bottle of water. "Blackwood compromised sandstone. We can't risk taking you back there until the situation is contained." Facility 7, the name triggered a memory from her father's notebook. a black site located somewhere in the desert rumored to house projects too sensitive for conventional military installations. "This is about more than my unauthorized flight," she stated, watching Carter's expression carefully. "Much more." His gaze shifted to the window as the SUV accelerated across the desert. "You encountered something in that canyon, Major. Something that wasn't supposed to exist." The journey took nearly 2 hours following unmarked desert roads that appeared on no civilian map. Reynolds used the time to gather her thoughts, reviewing everything she'd seen in the Canyon of No Return. The missile that had targeted the extraction helicopters had displayed capabilities beyond any known weapon system. No heat signature, no radar profile, yet deadly accurate. And then there was the man on the ridge, watching her with such calculated interest. The SUV finally slowed as they approached what appeared to be a simple mining operation. A chain-link fence surrounded weathered buildings and equipment that had clearly seen better days. A faded sign warned of private property, the perfect cover for a government facility hiding in plain sight. The vehicle passed through 3 security checkpoints before stopping at what appeared to be the main entrance. Carter escorted Reynolds inside, where the facade of abandonment immediately gave way to military precision. Armed guards stood at attention, and advanced security systems monitored every approach. The contrast between exterior and interior was jarring. Carter led her down a series of corridors, each requiring higher security clearance than the last. They finally arrived at a medical bay where a doctor waited to examine her injuries. The shrapnel wound on her shoulder was cleaned and dressed with efficiency. Throughout the procedure, Reynolds noted at least 6 cameras monitoring her from different angles. "When do I get answers?" she asked as the doctor finished applying the bandage. "Now," responded a familiar voice from the doorway. Jack Harmon stood there, his weathered face showing relief at seeing her alive. Beside him was a tall, distinguished man with silver hair and the unmistakable bearing of flag rank. General Frank Mitchell wore no insignia on his unmarked flight suit, but his authority was evident in the way every person in the room straightened at his presence. "Major Reynolds," Mitchell said, crossing the room to shake her hand. "Welcome to Facility 7. I apologize for the cloak and dagger routine, but events have forced our hand." "Sir," Reynolds acknowledged, standing despite the doctor's protests. "I'd like to know what's going on. Why was Colonel Blackwood transmitting information about our operations? And what was that weapon system I encountered in the canyon?" Mitchell exchanged a glance with Harmon before responding. "Those questions are connected, Major. Please follow me." They proceeded to a secure briefing room 3 levels below the medical bay. The walls were lined with acoustic dampening material, and a sophisticated electronic countermeasure system hummed quietly in the corner, preventing any possibility of surveillance. A large digital display dominated one wall, currently showing satellite imagery of the Canyon of No Return. Once the doors sealed behind them, Mitchell activated additional security protocols before speaking. "What I'm about to share is classified well above your current clearance level. Under normal circumstances, you would never be briefed on this material, but these are not normal circumstances." He gestured toward the display, which shifted to show a series of images captured during Reynolds' flight. "Your encounter in the canyon was not random, Major. You were being tested." "Tested?" Reynolds repeated, brow furrowing. "By whom?" "A private military corporation called Nexus Dynamics." Mitchell replied, bringing up a corporate logo on the screen. "On the surface, they're a defense contractor developing next-generation weapons systems for the Pentagon. In reality, they've been running an unsanctioned program called Crimson Sky for nearly 2 decades. Reynolds felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. "That was the name of the weapons system that targeted our extraction helicopters." "Yes, Crimson Sky is an autonomous combat system designed to operate in environments where conventional aircraft would be vulnerable. The Canyon of No Return has been their primary testing ground since 1991, the year of her father's death." Reynolds met Harmon's gaze across the table, seeing confirmation in his eyes. "My father discovered this," she said. "It wasn't a question." Mitchell nodded. "Colonel James Reynolds was conducting a routine reconnaissance mission when he detected unusual electromagnetic signatures in the canyon. He investigated without authorization and discovered evidence of weapons testing. When he reported his findings to his commanding officer, he was sent back in to gather more evidence." Reynolds finished, pieces falling into place. "But it was a setup. They never expected him to return." "Precisely," Mitchell confirmed. "Your father was a casualty of corporate greed and military corruption." Nexus Dynamics had high-ranking officials in their pocket, including the general who ordered your father's fatal mission. They couldn't risk exposure not when billions in defense contracts were at stake. Reynolds absorbed this revelation with outward calm, though inside a storm of emotions threatened to overwhelm her. After years believing her father had died in a training accident, the truth was simultaneously vindicating and devastating. He had been murdered for doing his duty. So Blackwood works for them, she said, focusing on the present threat. Blackwood is one of many, Mitchell replied. Nexus has infiltrated multiple levels of military command. They've been sabotaging our efforts to investigate the canyon for years, ensuring any aircraft sent in would fail. They've been perfecting their system using our losses as data points. But Ghost Rider made it through, Harmon interjected. Twice. First with you 2 years ago and again today. That wasn't supposed to happen. Mitchell nodded, which is why we're having this conversation. Your success has forced their hand. They now know we're on to them and they'll accelerate their timetable. What exactly is Crimson Sky? Reynolds asked, leaning forward. The weapon I encountered doesn't match any system I'm familiar with. Mitchell tapped a command, bringing up classified specifications on the display. It's a networked, autonomous weapons platform combining advanced AI with stealth technology. No heat signature, minimal radar cross-section, and a targeting system that adapts to countermeasures in real time. It's designed to make human pilots obsolete, Harmon added grimly. The implications were staggering. Such a system could render conventional air forces ineffective overnight. Nations with this technology would hold an insurmountable advantage in any conflict. Why would the Pentagon allow this? Reynolds asked. They wouldn't, Mitchell replied. That's the point. Nexus isn't developing this for the U.S. military. They're planning to sell it to the highest bidder on the international market. Certain elements within our government have been willfully blind to this threat, either through corruption or misguided belief they could control the outcome. Reynolds thought of Phoenix Unit, the men she'd risked everything to save. What about Captain Reeves and his team? Why were they in the canyon? That wasn't planned, Mitchell admitted. Phoenix Unit was extracting an asset from Pakistan who had information about Nexus operations in the region. They took a route through the canyon to avoid detection by Pakistani forces. Nexus saw an opportunity to eliminate both the asset and a special forces team that had gotten too close to their operation. The man they were protecting, Reynolds said. Who is he? Mitchell hesitated, then apparently decided she deserved the complete truth. Dr. Fareed al-Zawahri, former nuclear physicist and weapons developer for the Pakistani government. He defected after discovering Nexus was testing components of Crimson Sky in his facility without Pakistani knowledge. The door to the briefing room opened, and a middle-aged man of Middle Eastern descent entered, escorted by 2 security personnel. He had the intense eyes of a scientist and the cautious demeanor of someone who had recently escaped death. Dr. Al-Zawahri, Mitchell said by way of introduction. This is Major Sarah Reynolds, the pilot who ensured your extraction. The scientist inclined his head respectfully. Major, I owe you my life, as do Captain Reeves and his men. They're all safe, Reynolds asked. Yes, Mitchell confirmed. Currently recovering at a secure medical facility. Captain Reeves asked me to convey his personal thanks. Al-Zawahri moved to the display, fingers moving across the controls with practiced ease. With your permission, General, I would like to show Major Reynolds what we're truly facing. At Mitchell's nod, the scientist brought up a series of technical schematics. Crimson Sky is more than a weapon, Major. It is an integrated air defense system designed to autonomously identify target and destroy any aerial threat without human intervention. He expanded one section of the schematic. The system uses a distributed network of sensors and weapons platforms, all controlled by an artificial intelligence. Individual units are small and nearly undetectable, but they communicate constantly, sharing targeting data and adapting their strategy in real time. Like a hive mind, Reynolds observed. Precisely, Al-Zawahri confirmed. But what makes it truly dangerous is its learning capability. Every encounter teaches the system new tactics. Your survival today was unprecedented, which means the system will analyze your flight pattern and develop countermeasures specifically designed to defeat an A-10 piloted by someone with your skills. The implications were chilling. Not just a weapon, but an adaptive adversary that evolved with each engagement. Where does the system's hardware reside? Reynolds asked, thinking like a tactician. Every network has a central node, a brain. Al-Zawahiri smiled thinly. You think like a soldier. Yes, there is a central processing facility buried deep within the canyon itself. That is why they chose such a remote location. The natural terrain provides both cover for their activities and an ideal testing ground. And that's our target, Mitchell stated. Dr. Al-Zawahiri has provided us with coordinates and access codes that should allow us to infiltrate the facility. Once inside, we can gather evidence of Nexus's illegal activities and shut down Crimson Sky permanently. Reynolds studied the canyon map now displayed on the screen. With all due respect, sir, an infiltration seems risky. Why not just bomb the facility from high altitude? Two reasons, Mitchell replied. First, we need evidence that will stand up in court. This goes beyond military action. We're talking about corporate espionage and treason. Second, the facility is too well protected. Conventional bombing would be detected and intercepted before it could do significant damage. Which leaves a ground assault, Harmon concluded. Yes, Mitchell confirmed. Phoenix unit has volunteered despite their injuries. They'll insert under cover of darkness with close air support from me, Reynolds interrupted, understanding immediately. Ghost Rider is the only aircraft that's proven it can survive the canyon's defenses. A brief silence fell over the room. Harmon cleared his throat. Ghost Rider took heavy damage, Sarah. She's grounded for weeks, if not months. Then get me another A-10, Reynolds insisted. Mitchell shook his head. It's not just the aircraft, Major. It's the pilot. You've flown that canyon twice and survived. No one else has that experience. But more importantly, you've demonstrated an ability to counter Crimson Sky's targeting systems. We believe that's partly due to techniques your father documented in his notebook. Reynolds thought of the leather-bound journal with its detailed notes on canyon flight paths and counter-detection strategies. Her father had unknowingly provided the key to defeating the very system that had killed him. How soon can we move? She asked. 48 hours, Mitchell replied. We need time to prepare Ghost Rider. Ghost Rider is down, Reynolds pointed out. Mitchell's expression showed the first hint of a smile. Is she Agent Carter? Please escort Major Reynolds to Hangar 3. The underground facility was larger than Reynolds had initially realized. Their journey to Hangar 3 took them through corridors carved directly into the bedrock, reinforced with steel and concrete. Security grew progressively tighter until they reached a massive vault door that required Mitchell's personal biometric authorization. The door slid open to reveal a cavernous space housing a single aircraft. Reynolds stopped in her tracks, momentarily speechless. It was an A-10 Thunderbolt II, but unlike any she had ever seen. The traditional olive drab paint had been replaced with a matte black finish that seemed to absorb light. Additional armor plating reinforced the cockpit and engine housings, while the wings had been modified with what appeared to be advanced electronic warfare pods. The GAU-88A Avenger cannon remained the centerpiece, but even it had received upgrades with a modified barrel assembly and enhanced cooling system. Most striking of all was the aircraft's designation painted in dark gray beneath the cockpit Ghost Rider 2. What am I looking at? Reynolds asked, circling the aircraft with professional assessment. Project Phoenix, Mitchell answered. A prototype based on your father's research. The A-10 airframe modified with stealth technology and advanced countermeasures specifically designed to operate in denied airspace like the canyon. Reynolds ran her hand along the fuselage, feeling the unusual texture of the radar-absorbent material. How long has this been in development? Since shortly after your first canyon flight 2 years ago, Mitchell admitted. When you brought Ghost Rider back, despite all odds, it confirmed our suspicions that the A-10 platform had unique advantages against Crimson Sky. We've been working on this variant ever since, incorporating everything we've learned about the enemy system. Reynolds climbed the ladder to examine the cockpit. The familiar layout had been enhanced with next-generation avionics and a heads-up display unlike anything in the current inventory. Why wasn't I informed? This is exactly what I needed today. Security concerns, Mitchell replied. Until we identified the extent of Nexus's infiltration, we couldn't risk exposing Project Phoenix. Your grounding after the first canyon incident wasn't just punitive. It was protective, keeping you out of sight until we needed you. You used me as bait, Reynolds realized, turning to face Mitchell. Today's mission. You knew Blackwood would reveal himself if I flew into the canyon again. Mitchell didn't deny it. We needed to flush out their operative at Sandstone. Your unauthorized flight provided the perfect opportunity. The revelation should have angered her, but Reynolds found herself respecting the strategy. It had worked exactly as intended, exposing Blackwood while demonstrating the continuing vulnerability of Crimson Sky to her piloting techniques. "When do I start training on this aircraft?" she asked, returning to the practical matter at hand. "Immediately," Mitchell responded. "You have 24 hours to familiarize yourself with the new systems before mission briefing. Chief Master Sergeant Harmon will serve as your crew chief, and Dr. Al-Zawari will provide technical support regarding Crimson Sky's capabilities." Reynolds nodded, already cataloging the differences between this aircraft and her familiar Ghost Rider. The learning curve would be steep but manageable. The A-10's fundamental handling characteristics would remain largely unchanged despite the modifications. "There's one more thing you should know," Mitchell added, his tone shifting slightly. "The man you saw observing you from the ridgeline. We've identified him from your description and Ghost Rider's gun camera footage. His name is Viktor Zakhaev, former Spetsnaz operative and current head of field operations for Nexus Dynamics." Reynolds felt her blood chill at the name. "Zakhaev was in Iraq in 1991. "Yes," Mitchell confirmed. "He was the one who shot down your father after Colonel Reynolds discovered the early Crimson Sky testing. Zakhaev has been overseeing the program ever since, eliminating anyone who gets too close." The personal connection transformed the mission from professional to deeply personal. This wasn't just about national security anymore. It was about justice for her father. "I'll be ready," Reynolds stated, eyes returning to Ghost Rider 2 with newfound determination. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of intensive training. Reynolds spent 12 hours in the simulator, mastering the new aircraft's enhanced capabilities. Ghost Rider 2 maintained the legendary durability of the standard A-10 while adding stealth characteristics that would confound Crimson Sky's detection systems. The electronic warfare suite could actively jam enemy targeting systems, while the modified engines provided additional thrust without increasing heat signature. Most impressive was the advanced targeting system integrated with the GAU-8A cannon. It could identify and prioritize threats with minimal pilot input, allowing Reynolds to focus on flying while the weapon systems handled target acquisition. Between simulator sessions, she studied Dr. Al-Zawari's detailed briefings on Crimson Sky's architecture. The system had weaknesses, primarily its reliance on network communications. If they could disrupt the connection between the distributed weapons platforms and the central processing facility, individual units would be forced to operate autonomously, making them far less effective. Throughout the preparations, Jack Harmon remained by her side, offering insights from his decades of experience. His knowledge of the A-10 platform was unmatched, and he had personally overseen many of the modifications to Ghost Rider 2. "Your father would be proud," he told her during a rare break. "Not just of your flying, but of your determination to finish what he started." Reynolds had been studying her father's notebook, cross-referencing his observations with Al-Zawari's intelligence. He knew Jack. He knew something was wrong in that canyon, but he didn't have all the pieces. "We do." Harmon nodded soberly. "James always had good instincts, just like his daughter." The mission briefing had took place 36 hours after Reynolds' arrival at Facility 7. General Mitchell presided over the session, with Phoenix Unit joining via secure video link from their recovery location. Captain Reeves and his team looked battered but determined, their resolve strengthened by their narrow escape. "Operation Sundown will commence at 0200 tomorrow." Mitchell began activating the holographic display that dominated the briefing room. A three-dimensional model of the Canyon of No Return appeared with key locations highlighted. "Phoenix Unit will insert via halo jump at the Southern Canyon entrance, proceeding on foot to the facility entrance located here." He indicated a concealed door built into the canyon wall. "Dr. Al-Zawari's access codes should get you inside. Once there, your primary objective is to reach the central server room and download all data relating to Crimson Sky development and deployment. Secondary objective is to place demolition charges at these structural points, which will collapse the facility once you're clear." Reeves's voice came through the speaker. "What's our extraction plan, sir?" "Two-phase," Mitchell replied. "Once you've secured the data and set the charges, proceed to the northern exit where Black Hawks will be standing by. However, we anticipate heavy resistance as soon as you're detected. That's where Major Reynolds comes in." All eyes turned to Reynolds as the display shifted to show Ghost Rider 2's flight path. "Major Reynolds will provide close air support throughout the operation. Once Phoenix breaches the facility, Crimson Sky will activate in full defensive mode. Ghost Rider 2 will engage these defenses, drawing attention away from the ground team while also targeting key external components of the system. Reynolds studied the flight path. It would take her through the narrowest sections of the canyon areas, where even the slimmest error would result in collision with the canyon walls. At night, the difficulty would increase exponentially. We expect Nexus security forces to respond within 30 minutes of breach, Mitchell continued. These forces include ground troops and conventional aircraft. Our intelligence suggests they have at least 2 Apache gunships stationed near the facility. Major Reynolds will need to neutralize these threats while continuing to suppress Crimson Sky assets. The complexity of the mission was daunting. Reynolds would be simultaneously engaging multiple enemy systems while navigating treacherous terrain in near-total darkness. Any one of these challenges would be difficult enough. Combined, they created a scenario that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Questions, Mitchell asked, looking around the room. What's our contingency if Crimson Sky adapts to Ghost Rider 2's countermeasures? Reynolds asked. The system's learning capability remained her primary concern. Dr. Al-Zawahiri has programmed several electronic warfare packages, Mitchell answered. Each uses a different approach to jamming Crimson Sky's communications. If one fails, switch to the next. Keep the system guessing. Reeves spoke up from the video feed. What about Zakhaev? Intelligence suggests he spends most of his time at Adamus facility. Mitchell's expression hardened. If encountered, Zakhaev is to be captured alive if possible. He possesses critical intelligence about Nexus operations worldwide. However, mission success takes priority. If he threatens the operation, take appropriate action. The briefing continued with detailed discussions of communication protocols, emergency extraction plans, and intelligence updates. Throughout, Reynolds found herself studying the canyon map, committing every twist and turn to memory. There would be no room for hesitation once they were committed. As the briefing concluded, Mitchell held Reynolds back while the others filed out. A word in private, Major. When they were alone, Mitchell's official demeanor softened slightly. I knew your father, Sarah. We flew together during Desert Storm. He was one of the finest officers I've ever served with, and his death has haunted me for years. I suspected the truth, but could never prove it, not until recently. Reynolds had wondered about this connection. Is that why you've been protecting me, because of my father? Partly, Mitchell admitted, but primarily because you're the right pilot for this mission. Your skills in the canyon prove that twice over. Just understand what we're up against. Nexus Dynamics has powerful allies, both in government and private industry. Even if we succeed tomorrow, this won't end with the destruction of one facility. You think there are other Crimson Sky installations? Reynolds concluded. I know there are, Mitchell confirmed grimly. Dr. Al-Zawahiri has identified at least 3 other testing sites around the world. What we're doing tomorrow is just the first step in dismantling a global operation. The implication was clear. This mission was the beginning of a longer campaign, not its conclusion. If Reynolds survived tomorrow, she would be committed to seeing it through to the end. I understand, sir, she said simply. Mitchell nodded, satisfied. Get some rest, Major. Wheels up at Ur 100. Sleep proved elusive that night. Reynolds lay on her bunk, father's notebook open beside her mind, racing through mission parameters and contingency plans. The weight of tomorrow's operation pressed down on her, along with the newfound knowledge about her father's fate. After years believing he had died in an accident, the truth was a blade of ice in her heart. He had been murdered for his integrity. At 23:30, she gave up on sleep entirely. Dressing in her flight suit, she made her way to Hangar 3, where Ghost Rider 2 waited in Predator stillness. The maintenance crew had completed final checks, and the aircraft was fueled and armed for the morning mission. Its matte black surface seemed to drink in the hangar lights, revealing nothing. Jack Harmon sat on a crate near the nose, similarly unable to rest. He acknowledged her with a nod as she approached. Couldn't sleep either, he asked. Too much to process, Reynolds admitted, running her hand along the aircraft's fuselage. I keep thinking about my father, about what he must have felt when he realized what was happening. Harmon's weathered face showed understanding, born of shared experience. James Reynolds was a realist, Sarah. He knew the risks when he decided to investigate those anomalous readings, but he also believed some principles were worth dying for. Truth, justice, protecting his country from threats both foreign and domestic. Were you there when he made his final flight? Harmon nodded slowly. I was his crew chief, prepared his aircraft myself. He knew something was wrong with the mission parameters, but he went anyway. His last words to me were, if something happens, make sure Sarah gets my notebooks. I failed him on that count. The military seized everything after his death. It took me years to recover just the one I gave you. The revelation staggered Reynolds. Harmon had been carrying this burden for decades, waiting for the right moment to fulfill his promise to her father. You didn't fail him, she said firmly. You're here now helping me finish what he started. That's what matters. Harmon smiled faintly. You're so much like him. Same determination, same moral compass. They lapsed into comfortable silence, each lost in private thoughts as the minutes ticked toward mission launch. Around them, Facility 7 hummed with pre-operation activity personnel moving with purpose as final preparations were completed. At midnight, Dr. Al-Zawari joined them carrying a small case containing the electronic warfare modules that would be installed in Ghost Rider 2 systems. His hands moved with precision as he explained each device's function. This primary module creates a false electronic signature, making you appear as multiple smaller targets to Crimson Sky's sensors, he explained. The second disrupts their networked communications on rotating frequencies. The third, which I hope you will not need to use, is an electromagnetic pulse generator. It will disable Crimson Sky within a half-mile radius, but also affects your own systems for approximately 30 seconds. Last resort only, Reynolds noted, memorizing the activation sequence. Indeed, Al-Zawari agreed. Save it for the most desperate situation. As he worked, Reynolds observed the scientist's focused intensity. Why did you defect, Doctor? You had a prestigious position in Pakistan's defense establishment. Al-Zawari's hands paused momentarily. When I discovered Nexus was using my research without authorization, I initially planned only to report it to my superiors. Then I found evidence of their broader intentions. His eyes met hers. Crimson Sky is not meant merely for defense, Major. Its architecture allows for offensive deployment on an unprecedented scale. In the wrong hands, it could initiate conflicts that would escalate beyond control. You risked your life to prevent that, Reynolds observed. As you risk yours, he replied, simply returning to his work. At 0045, the pre-mission briefing commenced. Final intelligence updates were reviewed, communication frequencies confirmed, and emergency protocols rehearsed one last time. Phoenix unit reported ready for insertion, their Halo equipment checked and double-checked. General Mitchell concluded with words that resonated beyond the immediate mission. What you do tonight will not make headlines. It won't earn medals or public recognition, but it may well prevent a fundamental shift in the balance of global power. Good hunting and Godspeed. At precisely 0100, Reynolds climbed into Ghost Rider 2's cockpit. The familiar environment had subtle differences. Enhanced displays, additional control interfaces for the new systems, and the modified heads-up display that would prove crucial for night navigation through the canyon. She ran through the pre-flight checklist with methodical precision, each system reporting ready for action. The electronic warfare modules were integrated and standing by. Weapon systems were armed and calibrated. The GAU-8A cannon was loaded with a full complement of 30mm rounds and hardpoints beneath the wings, carried Maverick missiles and specialized bunker-busting ordnance. Jack Harmon stood by the cockpit performing his final inspection with the same attention to detail he'd shown throughout his career. Satisfied, he looked up at Reynolds. Bring her back in one piece this time, he said, the gruff tone belying his concern. Reynolds smiled. I'll do my best, Chief. Harmon stepped back as the canopy lowered, sealing Reynolds in the cockpit. Through the clear barrier, he rendered a perfect salute, which she returned with equal precision. Then her focus shifted entirely to the mission ahead. The massive hangar doors parted, revealing the underground runway that would allow Ghost Rider 2 to launch directly from Facility 7. The taxiway stretched before her, lights guiding the way to the launch tunnel that would deliver her to the desert above. Reynolds engaged the engines, feeling the familiar vibration as twin turbofans roared to life. Ghost Rider 2 rolled forward, moving with purpose toward the mission that would determine not just her fate, but potentially the future of aerial warfare itself. In the darkness of the canyon of no return, Crimson Sky waited its artificial intelligence, analyzing data from Reynolds' previous encounters, developing countermeasures for her tactics. It did not know that tonight the hunter would become the hunted. As Ghost Rider 2 accelerated down the runway, Sarah Reynolds thought of her father, of his courage and sacrifice. Tonight she would write the next chapter in their shared legacy. Tonight she would bring light to the darkness that had claimed him. The A-10 lifted into the night sky, black against black, invisible to all but the most sophisticated detection systems. Operation Sundown had begun. Darkness enveloped Ghost Rider 2 as Sarah Reynolds guided the aircraft toward the canyon of no return. Stars pierced the moonless night, offering minimal illumination across the desert landscape below. The A-10's enhanced night vision systems transformed the world into shades of green, revealing terrain features invisible to the naked eye. Reynolds maintained radio silence, flying at 300 feet above the desert floor. Her course took her wide around Sandstone Base, avoiding any possibility of detection by remaining Nexus operatives. Ghost Rider 2's stealth modifications masked its radar signature, while its matte black exterior rendered it nearly invisible against the night sky. Phoenix lead to Spectre radio check. Captain Reeves' voice came through her headset using the mission call signs established during briefing. Spectre copies Phoenix, Reynolds responded, voice calm, despite the tension coiling inside her. Position Bravo 3 on schedule. What's your status? Halo insertion complete. Team assembled at southern entrance. Proceeding to target. ETA 20 minutes. Understood. I'll be in position for your breach. The exchange was brief by necessity. Every transmission increased the risk of interception, even on encrypted channels. Reynolds returned her focus to navigation, checking her position against the memorized landmarks. The canyon entrance loomed ahead, a deeper darkness against the night sky. Unlike her previous daylight missions, tonight's approach offered new challenges. The canyon walls vanished into shadow, their exact dimensions uncertain despite the advanced optics. Reynolds reduced speed, relying more on instinct than instruments, as Ghost Rider 2 slipped into the narrow passage. The familiar sensation of confinement returned immediately. Rock walls rose on both sides, sometimes with less than 900 feet of clearance. At night, the margins for error shrank even further. Reynolds flew by feel as much as sight, her hands gentle on the controls as the A-10 descended deeper into the canyon's embrace. 5 minutes in, the first warning indicators appeared. Crimson Sky had detected her presence, though its response seemed tentative, as if uncertain what it was sensing. Reynolds activated the primary electronic warfare module. Ghost Rider 2's signature split into multiple phantom returns, confusing the autonomous system's targeting algorithms. Spectre to Phoenix, she transmitted. Defensive systems are active at your approach point. Engaging now to clear your path. Without waiting for acknowledgement, Reynolds pushed Ghost Rider 2 into a shallow dive. The canyon narrowed ahead, forcing her to bank between jutting rock formations. At the next bend, her night vision revealed the first weapon emplacement, a small automated turret mounted on the canyon wall, its sensors already tracking her approach. The GAU-8, a cannon, spoke for the first time that night, its distinctive roar echoing through the canyon. 30-millimeter rounds shredded the turret, sending sparks and debris cascading into the darkness below. Reynolds didn't pause to admire her handiwork, already banking toward the next threat her systems had identified. For the next 10 minutes, she conducted a lethal ballet through the canyon, systematically eliminating Crimson Sky's external defenses. Each engagement revealed more about the system's capabilities. It was learning, adapting to her tactics with each passing minute. Weapon emplacements began firing earlier, attempting to predict her flight path rather than react to it. They're getting smarter, she murmured to herself, executing an evasive maneuver as surface-to-air missiles launched from concealed positions. The missiles tracked to her momentarily before losing lock, confused by the electronic countermeasures. Phoenix to Spectre, we're at the facility entrance, Rabies reported. Preparing to breach. Be advised, we're detecting significant power fluctuations. Something's happening inside. Reynolds checked her position. She was 3 kilometers north of the facility entrance, having cleared most of the external defenses in that section. Copy, Phoenix. I'll maintain overwatch. Be careful in there. The canyon widened slightly near the facility location, giving Reynolds room to establish a holding pattern. Ghost Rider 2 circled like a predator, sensors probing for any remaining threats, while she waited for Phoenix unit to breach the entrance. 2 minutes later, Reeves' voice returned, tension evident despite his professional tone. Spectre, we're in. Minimal resistance so far, but the facility appears to be initiating some kind of emergency protocol. Systems powering up throughout the complex. Reynolds was about to respond when her threat detection system blared an urgent warning. Multiple radar signatures had appeared at the Northern Canyon entrance. "Phoenix, be advised we have company," reading at least 2 helicopters entering the canyon from the north. She banked Ghost Rider 2 toward the new threat, activating the second electronic warfare module, to mask her approach. The night vision display resolved the contacts: 2 Apache attack helicopters moving in formation, their weapon systems already active. Nexus security forces responding to the breach. Engaging helicopter elements. She transmitted, then focused entirely on the task at hand. The Apaches separated as they detected her approach, adopting standard combat spacing to maximize their engagement envelope. They were flying without lights, relying on their own advanced vision systems to navigate the canyon. Under normal circumstances, 2 Apaches would easily overwhelm a single A-10, especially in confined space where the Thunderbolt's superior speed couldn't be utilized. But these weren't normal circumstances. And Ghost Rider 2 wasn't a standard A-10. Reynolds pushed the aircraft into a steep climb, gaining altitude, before inverting into a dive that brought her directly between the 2 helicopters. The unexpected maneuver momentarily confused their pilots, giving her the critical seconds needed to target the lead Apache. The GAU-8A cannon fired a precise burst rounds, tearing through the helicopter's main rotor assembly. The Apache shuddered violently, then began an uncontrolled descent, its pilot fighting desperately to execute an emergency landing on the canyon floor. The second Apache reacted immediately, launching a Hellfire missile toward Ghost Rider 2. Reynolds jinked hard right, the missile tracking her movement. At the last possible moment, she cut power to the engines and deployed air brakes, causing Ghost Rider 2 to decelerate dramatically. The missile overshot, unable to correct for the sudden change in velocity, and detonated against the canyon wall. Reynolds reignited the engines and banked back toward the remaining Apache. Its pilot was good already, maneuvering for a gun solution while maintaining awareness of the confined space. For 30 seconds, they engaged in a deadly dance through the darkness, each seeking advantage over the other. The deciding factor was Reynolds' intimate knowledge of the canyon. She led the Apache into a narrow section where its greater maneuverability was negated by lack of space. When the helicopter slowed to navigate a tight bend, she executed a combat turn that placed Ghost Rider 2 directly behind it, cannon already firing. The Apache disintegrated under the barrage secondary explosions, marking the detonation of its remaining ordnance. Reynolds pulled away from the fireball, checking her systems for damage. Ghost Rider 2 had weathered the engagement without significant harm. Spectre to Phoenix helicopter threat neutralized. What's your status? Static filled the channel momentarily before Reeves responded. We've reached the central server room. Al-Zawahiri's downloading the data now. But we've encountered heavy internal security, automated defense systems, and human guards. Casualties. 1 wounded, not critical. We can complete the mission, but extraction may be complicated. Be advised, we're picking up communications suggesting Zakhaev is on site directing the defense personally. The name sent ice through Reynolds' veins. Viktor Zakhaev, the man who had killed her father, was within reach. She forced herself to remain focused on the mission parameters. Understood, Phoenix. Continue as planned. I'll ensure your extraction corridor remains clear. As if in response to her words, Ghost Rider 2's threat detection system screamed a warning. Multiple launches detected from concealed positions throughout the canyon. This wasn't a standard attack. It was a coordinated ambush. At least 8 missiles streaked toward her position from different directions, their guidance systems locked onto Ghost Rider 2 despite the electronic countermeasures. Reynolds realized with cold clarity that Crimson Sky had adapted to her defenses, analyzing previous engagements to develop an effective counter strategy. No conventional maneuver could evade all 8 missiles in the confined space. Reynolds activated the third and final electronic warfare module, the one Al-Zawahiri had called a last resort. The electromagnetic pulse radiated outward from Ghost Rider 2 in an invisible sphere, temporarily disabling all electronic systems within range. The missiles lost guidance, simultaneously falling like dead metal to the canyon floor or detonating harmlessly against the rock walls. But as warned, Ghost Rider 2's own systems also went dark. For 30 harrowing seconds, Reynolds flew blind, relying entirely on the ambient starlight filtering into the canyon and her own spatial awareness. The aircraft drifted dangerously close to the western wall before the system's reactivated displays flickering back to life just in time to prevent collision. That was too close, Reynolds muttered, reorienting herself as Ghost Rider 2's capabilities returned. The EMP had bought her precious time, but had also revealed her position to any observing sensors. She needed to relocate immediately. She banked hard toward the facility section of the canyon, intending to provide closer support to Phoenix Unit. As she approached, the scale of the operation became apparent. What had appeared to be natural rock formations concealed a massive underground complex. Power systems and ventilation structures were visible from the air, disguised as geological features, but recognizable with Ghost Rider 2's enhanced optics. Phoenix to Spectre data retrieval complete, Reeves reported. Planting charges now. Be advised, facility security protocols have escalated. They're activating something big in the central chamber. Al-Zawahiri says it's a prototype of the next generation system. Reynolds scanned the facility exterior, noting increased power signatures emanating from what appeared to be the central hub. Copy, Phoenix. How much longer do you need? 5 minutes to place remaining charges. Then we'll exfiltrate through the northern emergency exit. It should put us about 800 meters from extraction point. I'll be waiting, Reynolds assured him, continuing to circle the facility perimeter. Something was happening below something that registered on her sensors as a massive power fluctuation. The canyon floor at the facility's center suddenly split open, mechanical doors retracting to reveal a launch platform rising from below. On it stood what appeared to be a sleek, unmanned combat aircraft unlike any Reynolds had ever seen. Its design was reminiscent of advanced stealth fighters, but smaller and more angular, with no visible cockpit or conventional control surfaces. Phoenix, are you seeing this? Reynolds transmitted urgently. Affirmative, Reeves replied. Al-Zawahiri confirms it's the Crimson Sky Autonomous Air Combat Unit, first operational prototype. Zakhaev is attempting to launch it. Reynolds understood immediately. If that aircraft got airborne, Phoenix Unit would never reach extraction. Its capabilities would far exceed even Ghost Rider 2's advanced countermeasures. I'm taking it out, she decided, already banking toward the exposed platform. Prepare for immediate exfiltration. The GAU-88A cannon roared once more, rounds streaking toward the prototype aircraft. At the same moment, defensive turrets around the platform activated, filling the air with counterfire. Ghost Rider 2 shuddered as rounds impacted its armored fuselage, none penetrating, but each adding to the cumulative stress on the airframe. Reynolds' initial attack run damaged the prototype but failed to destroy it. The platform was already descending back into the facility, mechanical doors beginning to close. She would have one more chance before the target was lost. Ghost Rider 2 screamed toward the narrowing opening afterburners, engaged in a dangerous burst of speed given the confined space. Reynolds armed a Maverick missile, the targeting system locking onto the partially concealed prototype. Fox 1, she announced to no one launching the missile at minimum safe distance. The Maverick streaked through the closing doors, detonating inside the facility with enough force to send shockwaves throughout the canyon. Secondary explosions followed as the missile ignited fuel and ammunition stores. The facility's camouflaged exterior began to collapse in sections, revealing the true extent of the underground complex. Alarms echoed through the canyon, audible even over Ghost Rider 2's engines. Phoenix to Spectre, that did it. Facility critical systems are failing. Our charges will finish the job. We're moving to extraction point now, northern exit route. Reynolds acknowledged, already repositioning to cover their escape. The facility was burning from within, decades of secret development literally going up in flames. But the mission wasn't complete until Phoenix Unit was safely extracted. She established a holding pattern near the extraction point, scanning for any remaining threats. The canyon remained eerily quiet following the destruction of the prototype. Too quiet given the resources Nexus had committed to protecting the facility. Spectre, this is Phoenix. We've cleared the facility. Moving to extraction coordinates now, 8 minutes out. Copy, Phoenix. I have eyes on your position. Through her night vision, Reynolds could see the small team moving efficiently along the canyon floor, maintaining tactical spacing despite carrying one wounded operator. Movement on the ridge above caught her attention, a lone figure traversing the rocky terrain parallel to Phoenix Unit's route. Even from a distance, his purposeful movement suggested military training. Zakhaev. Reynolds banked toward the ridge, intent on eliminating the threat before he could engage the ground team. As she approached, the figure stopped and looked directly at her aircraft, seemingly unafraid despite being exposed. He raised an object in his right hand, pointing it toward Ghost Rider 2. Reynolds' warning systems detected a laser designator, activating painting her aircraft for a weapon system she couldn't yet detect. The threat materialized seconds later. From concealed positions along both canyon walls, a final layer of Crimson Sky defenses revealed themselves. Not conventional surface-to-air missiles, but compact railgun emplacements, their electromagnetic acceleration requiring minimal moving parts and generating no heat signature until the moment of firing. The first shot narrowly missed Ghost Rider 2's right wing, the hypersonic projectile, visible only as a streak of superheated air. Reynolds reacted instinctively, throwing the aircraft into evasive maneuvers while activating all remaining countermeasures. Phoenix be advised, we have active railgun defenses on the ridgeline. Take cover immediately. The second shot clipped Ghost Rider 2's left wing, tearing through metal with devastating force. Warning indicators flashed across Reynolds' console as hydraulic systems began to fail. The A-10 remained airborne, but control was becoming problematic. Zakhaev was directing the defensive fire using his laser designator to guide the railgun targeting. Reynolds realized she couldn't evade indefinitely. Each shot came closer as the system calculated her evasive patterns. She made her decision in an instant. Ghost Rider 2 banked directly towards Zakhaev's position, accelerating despite the damage to its wing. The unexpected frontal attack caught him off guard, forcing him to abandon his elevated position as 30-millimeter rounds chewed through the ridge around him. Reynolds didn't pursue. Instead, she used the momentary disruption to target the railgun emplacements themselves, systematically destroying each with precise cannon fire. With Zakhaev's coordination broken, the remaining defenses fired blindly, their shots disappearing harmlessly into the night sky. Spectre to Phoenix, railgun threat neutralized. What's your position? 2 minutes from extraction point, Reeves responded. Blackhawks are inbound from the east ETA 3 minutes, but we've got a problem. Zakhaev is regrouping with ground forces at the canyon exit. They're setting up a blocking position. Reynolds checked her ammunition status. The cannon had less than 200 rounds remaining and just one Maverick missile. The damage to Ghost Rider 2's left wing was worsening, hydraulic fluid streaming behind the aircraft like dark blood. I'll clear your exit, she promised already, calculating the approach that would maximize effectiveness while minimizing exposure to ground fire. The northern canyon exit was wider than the southern entrance, opening into a valley that provided the only suitable landing zone for the extraction helicopters. Nexus security forces had established a hasty defensive perimeter using vehicles and natural cover to create interlocking fields of fire. At the center stood Zakhaev, directing the final stand with the calm efficiency that had made him legendary in special operations circles. Reynolds approached from high altitude, using the stars to mask her silhouette. Ghost Rider 2 doing toward the enemy position, gathering speed despite the damaged wing threatening to tear away completely. She waited until the last possible moment before pulling up, simultaneously releasing her final Maverick missile and opening fire with the cannon. The combined attack devastated the defensive position. The missile destroyed the center of the formation, while cannon fire scythed through the flanks. Men scattered in panic, abandoning equipment in their desperation to escape the metal storm descending from above. Through the chaos, Reynolds caught sight of Zakhaev. Unlike his men, he stood his ground, firing an anti-aircraft weapon from his shoulder directly at Ghost Rider 2. The missile streaked toward detracting the A-10 despite its countermeasures. Reynolds had no remaining evasive options. The damaged wing prevented the tight maneuvers that might have saved her in normal circumstances. Instead, she flew directly into the missile's path, trusting Ghost Rider 2's legendary durability to weather the impact. The explosion rocked the aircraft violently, alarms screaming throughout the cockpit as systems failed in cascade. The left wing partially separated, hanging from the fuselage by a few structural members. The corresponding engine sputtered and died, leaving Reynolds with half her normal power. Ghost Rider 2 began an uncontrolled descent toward the valley floor. Reynolds fought the stick with every ounce of strength, managing to establish marginal control despite the catastrophic damage. The aircraft would not remain airborne much longer, but she might be able to direct its final moments. She aimed the dying A-10 directly at Zakhaev's position. He recognized her intention, immediately abandoning his stand to seek cover. But Reynolds had anticipated this, adjusting her trajectory to intercept his escape route. Ghost Rider 2 roared over Zakhaev at an altitude of less than 50 feet, the damaged wing striking him with devastating force. The impact further damaged the aircraft but achieved its purpose. Zakhaev disappeared beneath the wing, his fate uncertain, but his threat neutralized. Reynolds had seconds to make her final decision. Ghost Rider 2 was coming apart around her, control systems failing completely. She could eject, trusting her survival to the parachute, or attempt to guide the aircraft to a crash landing that might leave her with a fighting chance. The decision was made for her when the canopy release mechanism failed, damaged in the missile impact. Ejection was no longer an option. Reynolds would live or die with Ghost Rider 2. She fought for control as the valley floor rushed up to meet her. In her earpiece, she could hear Reeves coordinating with the extraction helicopters, their arrival imminent. Phoenix unit had reached the rendezvous point, the mission nearly complete. With her remaining strength, Reynolds manipulated the functioning control surfaces to achieve the best possible crash attitude. Ghost Rider 2 responded sluggishly, but enough to convert what would have been a fatal nosedive into a marginally survivable belly landing. The impact was catastrophic. The A-10 slammed into the valley floor, skidding across rock and scrub as its remaining wing tore away completely. The cockpit remained remarkably intact, a testament to the aircraft's design philosophy that prioritized pilot survival above all else. Reynolds lost consciousness momentarily, the world going black before pain brought her back to awareness. She was alive, though injured, trapped in the crushed remains of Ghost Rider 2's cockpit. Blood clouded her vision, and at least 2 ribs were broken, sending sharp agony through her chest with each breath. Outside, she could hear the approaching helicopters, their rotors cutting through the night air. Closer still were voices, men moving toward the crash site with purpose. Whether Phoenix unit or Nexus forces, she couldn't determine. With effort, Reynolds released her harness and reached for her sidearm. If Nexus reached her first, she would not be taken alive. The secrets in her head were too valuable, the mission too important. The cockpit frame had warped during impact, sealing her inside the wreckage. Through the cracked canopy, shadows moved, flashlights piercing the darkness to illuminate her position. Reynolds raised her weapon finger, tensing on the trigger as a figure approached. "Major Reynolds," a familiar voice called. "It's Reeves. Hold your fire." Relief washed over her as Captain Reeves's face appeared at the shattered canopy. Behind him, Phoenix unit had established a perimeter securing the crash site while 2 operators worked to extract her from the wreckage. "The mission," she managed each word, sending fresh pain through her chest. "Did we succeed?" "Complete success," Reeves confirmed, helping her as the canopy was finally pried open. "Data secured, facility destroyed. Thanks to you, extraction will proceed as planned." Reynolds allowed herself to be pulled from the cockpit, wincing as her injuries protested the movement. The extraction helicopters were landing nearby rotors, whipping dust across the valley floor. "Zakhaev," she asked, remembering her final attack run. Reeves gestured toward a body lying crumpled 30 meters away, surrounded by Phoenix operators. "Dead on impact. Your wing caught him square. Fitting end considering what he did to your father." Justice at last. Reynolds felt no triumph, only a hollow satisfaction that her father's killer would claim no more lives. The Phoenix medic administered emergency treatment as they moved toward the waiting helicopters. Reynolds cast a final glance back at Ghost Rider 2, or what remained of it. Like its predecessor, it had accomplished its mission at the beast of its own existence. Some prices were worth paying. Aboard the Blackhawk, Reynolds finally allowed herself to rest, the adrenaline fading as medical personnel secured her for transport. Through the open door, she watched the valley recede as they gained altitude, the wreckage of Ghost Rider 2 diminishing to a dark smudge on the landscape. "We recovered something you might want," Reeves said, settling beside her stretcher. He placed a small object in her hand, a fragment of metal bearing Ghost Rider 2's identification marking, salvaged from the crash site. Reynolds closed her fingers around the memento, a tangible reminder of what had been accomplished and what had been sacrificed. "Thank you," she said simply. The helicopter banked eastward, carrying them away from the canyon of no return toward Facility 7. As consciousness began to fade, Reynolds thought of her father, hoping he would be proud of what she had accomplished in his name. 36 hours later, Sarah Reynolds awoke in the medical bay of Facility 7. Her injuries had been treated, though recovery would take weeks. Broken ribs, concussion, and various lacerations had been addressed by the skilled medical team. She was alive, which seemed miracle enough given the circumstances of Ghost Rider 2's final moments. Jack Harmon sat beside her bed, his weathered face showing relief as she opened her eyes. "Welcome back, Major. You had us worried for a while there." "The team," she asked, voice hoarse from intubation during surgery, "all accounted for, Phoenix unit is already debriefing with General Mitchell. The data they recovered exceeds our best expectations. Complete schematics of Crimson Sky personnel files, financial records. Nexus Dynamics is finished. Reynolds nodded, wincing as the movement aggravated her injuries. In Blackwood, facing military tribunal for treason, his cooperation might spare him the death penalty, but he'll never see freedom again. Harmon's expression hardened. He's already implicated 3 other high-ranking officers and 2 Defense Department officials. The corruption runs deeper than we thought. Before Reynolds could respond, the door opened to admit General Mitchell. He appeared tired but satisfied, the look of a commander whose operation had succeeded despite significant challenges. Major Reynolds, he acknowledged, approaching her bedside. Good to see you conscious. How are you feeling? Like I crashed an A-10, sir, she replied dryly. A brief smile crossed Mitchell's face. Fair assessment. The flight surgeon tells me you'll make a full recovery, though it will take time. What happens now, sir, with the information we recovered? Mitchell exchanged glances with Harmon before responding. That's partly why I'm here. The data Phoenix retrieved has confirmed our suspicions about Nexus operations globally. 3 additional facilities have been identified, each developing components of the Crimson Sky system. You're planning follow-up operations, Reynolds concluded. Yes, but with greater resources now that we have concrete evidence. The President has authorized a task force to systematically dismantle Nexus's entire infrastructure. Which brings me to the second reason for my visit. Mitchell produced an official document from his jacket pocket. These are orders reassigning you to Task Force Phoenix effective upon medical clearance. If you choose to accept, you will be promoted to Lieutenant Colonel and placed in command of air operations. The offer took Reynolds by surprise. Sir Ghost Rider 2 was destroyed. We don't have another aircraft with those capabilities. Not yet, Mitchell corrected. But based on the data recovered and your combat experience, we're already developing the next iteration. Ghost Rider 3 will incorporate everything we've learned with additional enhancements derived from Nexus's own research. The prospect of continuing the mission of ensuring her father's sacrifice led to lasting change resonated deeply with Reynolds. I accept, sir, pending medical clearance. Mitchell nodded, satisfied. I never doubted you would. Your father would be proud, Sarah, not just of what you've accomplished, but of who you've become. He stood to leave, but paused at the door. One more thing. Dr. Al-Zawari sends his regards. He's been temporarily assigned to our research division to assist with countermeasure development. Says he has some ideas specifically for your new aircraft. After Mitchell departed, Reynolds turned to Harmon. So it's not over. Wars like this are never truly over, Harmon replied philosophically. But we've won a significant battle. Nexus has been exposed, their primary research facility destroyed, and their leading operative eliminated. The balance has shifted in our favor. Reynolds nodded, slowly processing the implications. The mission that had begun as a rescue operation, then evolved into a personal quest for justice, had now become something larger. A commitment to ensuring that technologies like Crimson Sky could never threaten global security. I need to get back on my feet, she said, already calculating the rehabilitation timeline in her mind. Harmon smiled knowingly. Always looking forward, just like James, but recovery can't be rushed, Sarah. Trust me on that. He reached into his pocket and withdrew her father's notebook, somehow recovered from Ghost Rider 2's wreckage. Thought you might want this back. Some things are worth preserving. Reynolds accepted the battered journal, its pages now containing both her father's wisdom and her own additions. A legacy continued, a mission shared across generations. Thank you, Jack, for everything. Just doing what I promised your father I would, Harmon replied simply, looking after his little girl. Though I think you've proven you can handle yourself pretty well. 3 months later, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Reynolds stood in a secure hangar at an undisclosed location, watching as technicians applied the final touches to Ghost Rider 3. The aircraft incorporated everything learned from its predecessors, enhanced with technology recovered from the Nexus facility. Its sleek lines and advanced systems represented the perfect synthesis of A-10 ruggedness and cutting-edge stealth capability. Captain Reeves now. Major Reeves approached from the command center, tablet in hand. We've got confirmation on the second facility location. Mountain complex in the Caucasus Mountains, much more heavily defended than the canyon site. Reynolds nodded, studying the intelligence report he offered. Thermal imaging suggests extensive underground development, likely their primary manufacturing center. That's our assessment as well. Reeves glanced at Ghost Rider 3. She'll be ready for the operation. Final systems check tomorrow. Flight test the day after. If all goes well, we launch in 5 days. Reynolds traced her hand along the aircraft's fuselage, feeling the connection that always existed between pilot and machine. This time we're bringing her home intact. Reeves smiled. I never doubted it, Colonel. And as he departed, Reynolds remained beside the aircraft, contemplating the journey that had brought her to this point. From a grounded pilot seeking redemption to the commander of an elite task force targeting global threats. The cost had been high. Her father, countless others who had encountered Nexus operations, and very nearly her own life. But the mission continued. The Canyon of No Return had been just the beginning, the first step in dismantling an organization that threatened to fundamentally alter the balance of power through autonomous weapons technology. Ghost Rider the 3 represented more than an advanced aircraft. It symbolized the commitment to ensuring that human judgment, human courage, and human values remain central to warfare no matter how technology evolved. Reynolds checked her watch. The mission briefing would begin in 20 minutes, setting in motion the next phase of operations against Nexus Dynamics. There was much to do, preparations to finalize, contingencies to review. But for this moment, she allowed herself to stand quietly beside the aircraft that would carry her into battle once more. Ghost Rider 3 waited, powerful and patient, embodying the legacy of all who had sacrificed to reach this point. Sarah Reynolds was ready. The Canyon of No Return had claimed much from her, but it had also forged her into the leader now needed to finish what her father had started. As Ghost Rider the 3rd, she would return to the skies, continuing the fight for justice that transcended generations. The Phantom would ride again. 1 month after the Canyon of No Return operation, Washington, D.C. buzzed with unprecedented activity. In a secure conference room deep within the Pentagon, General Mitchell addressed a joint session of military leadership and intelligence directors, with the president joining remotely from the Situation Room. Gentlemen, the data retrieved from the Crimson Sky facility has confirmed our worst fears, Mitchell said, standing before a display showing global locations marked as Nexus facilities. Nexus Dynamics had developed autonomous combat AI capabilities beyond anything previously thought possible. Had they succeeded in deploying these systems on the international market, we would be facing a fundamental shift in warfare more significant than the introduction of nuclear weapons. The defense secretary leaned forward. What's the current status of their operation? Fragmented but not eliminated, Mitchell replied. Following Lieutenant Colonel Reynolds' successful mission, we've identified 7 high-ranking military officers and 3 Defense Department officials involved with Nexus. All have been detained. The corporate side is more complex. Nexus has shell companies and black site facilities in 12 countries. The Caucasus facility is their primary manufacturing center, but they also have research outposts in Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe. On-screen satellite imagery showed increased activity at these locations, equipment being moved, personnel evacuating. The international ripple effects were already evident. 3 nations had suddenly canceled weapons procurement contracts with American defense contractors. Intelligence reports indicated frantic communications between certain foreign military attachés and their home countries. The Russians and Chinese know something's happened, the CIA director noted. They're scrambling to determine how this affects their own autonomous weapons programs. And the market implications? Asked the Secretary of State. A financial analyst stepped forward. Major defense stocks have fluctuated wildly as rumors spread. 3 technology companies linked to Nexus have lost over 40% of their market value. We're also tracking unusual movement of funds through offshore accounts, billions being shifted to new shell corporations. Nexus is trying to preserve assets and rebuild under different names. The president's voice came through the speakers. What about the technological implications if this gets out? That's why Task Force Phoenix is essential, Mitchell responded. Lieutenant Colonel Reynolds and her team aren't just dismantling Nexus, they're preventing a technological pandemic. Every nation with the capability would rush to develop similar systems. The military balance wouldn't just shift, it would shatter. He brought up images of Ghost Rider 3. The technology we've recovered has both offensive and defensive applications. We've incorporated countermeasure systems into our new aircraft, but our priority remains retrieving all Crimson Sky research before it proliferates further. The Joint Chiefs Chairman studied the data with grave concern. The ethics committees and international treaties never anticipated this level of autonomous capability. This could render the Geneva Conventions obsolete overnight, which is precisely why we need Reynolds and Task Force Phoenix, Mitchell concluded. This isn't just about national security anymore. It's about preserving human control over warfare itself. As the meeting adjourned, Mitchell received a secure message on his tablet. Reynolds had completed her first test flight in Ghost Rider 3. The Caucasus mission was greenlit for next week. Beyond the Pentagon's walls, the world continued unaware of how close it had come to a technological point of no return and how a single pilot's courage had bought them precious time to prevent it. The game of shadows continued, but for the first time, they had the hunter they needed to win it.